Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Singing with Peggy. This one was a little bit delayed because I was working on maybe a series, maybe 2 or 3 on this topic, which is probably the one that is the most confusing. The topic today is resonance. It is a complex topic, it's hard to understand, and there are a lot of misunderstandings about resonance, about what it is. In fact, I saw some discussions of resonance on other places online, and that was one of my inspirations to do this series because I really wanted to talk about this subject. So I spent a couple of weeks doing a little more research and trying to figure out how I can make this a little more user-friendly. The reason that it is so complex and difficult is that it is a property of physics, the acoustics of sound, the physics of sound. So let me give you a definition of resonance. This is from good old Webster. It is the intensification and enriching of a musical tone by supplementary vibration. You may have heard the term sympathetic vibration, which is a good term to use too. So that pitch that we're talking about is the fundamental frequency. It is the frequency of the note that might be on the page or the one that you want to sing. And it is defined as the number of vibratory cycles per second. You've heard of tuning an orchestra to A440, this pitch. That is vibrating 440 times per second. Then by multiples, an octave higher, 880, an octave lower, 220. So we have a lot of vibratory cycles per second. We talked about the voice being a musical instrument, our power source, which is required, the energy source is the breath, and we might think about a trumpet as being a similar instrument, also uses the breath as a power source. The vibrating source for the voice we learned were the vocal folds. For a trumpet, that would be the mouthpiece. And in actuality, if we only had the sound that is coming from our vocal folds, it would be like that mouthpiece, kind of maybe an obnoxious buzz. So how do we make that obnoxious buzz into a beautiful tone? How do we make a tone that we identify as being the quality of a trumpet or an individual human voice, which amazingly is very different. You can identify an individual by their voice quality. You might know your favorite singer the minute that you hear the recording begin. So the tone quality is produced by harmonic overtones. That fundamental frequency does have a series of additional vibrations of bands of harmonics that we refer to them as. And those are created by the vocal tract. And they're not really evident to the ear. We hear the fundamental frequency and the beautiful tone quality, which is the result of the harmonics, but we don't hear the individual pitches for the most part. Now our trumpet has a fixed resonator. It is a solid tube, while the vocal tract is, according to Scott McCoy in Your Voice and Inside View, and that's a reference that I used a lot to prepare this lesson. He says it is the only instrument where articulation is a function of resonance. So we learned in our last session about using our articulators, the tongue, the teeth, the lips, the palate, in order to shape vowel sounds. And understanding how our vowel sounds are shaped is crucial to being able to work on a resonant voice. So our articulators are able to reshape the vocal tract. Optimal best resonance will be the result of shaping the vocal tract in a manner that is in sync with the vibration of that fundamental frequency. So we can find an optimal shape that will enhance the overtones created at the level of the larynx. Pretty amazing. Now in singing, we're constantly changing pitch. But the cool thing about the human voice is that for best resonance, we can constantly reshape our vocal tract. An example of how this works that you may be familiar with is a barbershop quartet. Now, they get together in their quartet and face each other closely and watch each other. And they do what they call vowel matching to make sure that their vowels are created in basically the same form, that they will get a resonance in their chord that is enhanced by that shape. And oftentimes the best barbershop quartets will be known by what they're called, their overtones are wonderful, and you can have this sense that these other pitches are vibrating within the performing space. Most of us have been in a choir where our director had us singing a chord and then constantly changing our vowel sounds and making sure we were perfectly in tune. If we were singing a C major chord, the director would say, "Oh, wow, do you hear the high C?" No one is singing that, and yet, because we're so in tune, you can hear that pitch in the room. And that, again, is the result of good resonance within that choir. So what is an actual resonator? We've talked about it being the vocal tract. Well, to understand that, in general, a resonator is a hollow, air-filled cavity. So it's like a tube, an empty tube. Now, we often talk about chest resonance, and this is a term wherein we get some of our confusion. We may feel sensations of vibration in our chest, but think about it. You've got bones there, you've got tissues, the lung itself is all spongy. It is not a hollow tube. It is not a resonator. Your sinuses and your facial bones are not resonators. The bones are not hollow. The sinuses are too small, and they're not accessible to the vibratory sound to function as a useful resonator. The skull is a bone. It's not hollow. There's brains inside, I hope. So even though you may feel like the vibrations coming out of the top of my head, and we call it head resonance, that is not a resonator. So it is not really possible to say, I'm going to place my tone in the mask in order to feel the resonance. This may be useful, and there's a lot of people who believe in that kind of imagery, and it can be helpful. But in reality, if you are feeling these sympathetic vibrations, that is a good sign to you that you are getting optimal resonance. But again, according to Scott McCoy, these are a singer's private resonance. You feel the vibrations, but nobody else can hear them. So what does this mean to us? Well, then we need to understand what our free resonators are. The resonators that reflect the sound wave within a void. And for the human, it is the vocal tract, which starts at the larynx. The first resonator is most likely the laryngeal collar, the space right above the opening of the larynx going up to the epiglottis. And this particular area is believed to be responsible for something known as the singer's formant. Formant is just referring to that shaping of resonance, a resonance specific to a particular pitch that you're singing, that you can shape and change. So it appears that those really well-trained, mostly male opera singers are able to produce the singer's formant because of their good technique. And that's going to involve all those things we've talked about, the posture and the breath and the right amount of breath energy and good focus and closure of the vocal folds. And then perhaps some of the result of our relaxation techniques that allow a nice relaxed space around the larynx. We also would hope that it is not a raised larynx or a lowered larynx, depressed, but that it is a medial position. So we can play around with some of the things that we did last week with moving the tongue. And you can see some movement in the laryngeal area. Some things that you can do maybe to relax your larynx is to chew, even to swallow. You know that the larynx does float there in the throat, and so it can rise and lower, and then we want it to just to return to its natural medial position. I've known some singers who swore by eating a little piece of apple before a performance. The pectin seems to be good for the throat and the health. And also you are doing a little bit of chewing and swallowing right before a performance with something that has some liquid in it as well. Another thing that you can do is the idea of the surprise breath. You're at the top of the mountain and you see this incredible view, and you take that wonderful open mouth breath also through your nose, and everything is going to be relaxed there. So if we can have a nice relaxed laryngeal collar and everything else comes together properly, you will get a ring that allows a male usually to project above an orchestra in an operatic performance. The tongue also must remain relaxed and flexible. We talked about it as an important articulator for vowel sounds. So the tip is always forward against the alveolar ridge, or the gum ridge, the back of the front teeth. I said that we might talk a little bit about the soft palate, and I think when we hear the term open throat, it's the idea that the pharynx itself is not restricted, and oftentimes if you have a lowered soft palate, you get a sensation of tightness, and that would, in that case, open that nasal port and allow the sound to vibrate more in the nasal cavity, and we get what we would call a nasal sound. We can play around a little bit with learning how to raise the soft palate to the proper position. And it does have muscles, the levator palatini, that will raise it. And we can also lower it to get us that nasal sound. So when the back of the tongue and the soft palate impact on some of our nasal sounds, NG in particular is one that we're going to use, you will have a feeling of closing off the oral cavity and singing through your nose. So let's play with that a little bit, and something you can do is take a small mirror. A dental mirror works really well. I hope this will show up on the video. But you can see that if you make an NG sound, you can see that my mirror fogged up. Yep, I think that's showing up, a foggy mirror. A foggy day in London town. We don't really want that most of the time in our singing. A little bit of a lowered velum soft palate may be okay in some country singing where you want that twang, but in general for our bel canto and for our training purposes, we want a nice raised soft palate. So if I do this, you can see that I got fog on the NG, but when I went to my ah, then I had no fog anymore because I was not using my nose as a resonator, a tube. So let's do a couple of exercises to work on that soft palate. First, let's take that nice open surprise breath and even think a little bit about, you've got a closed umbrella, and as it opens, that's going to be the domey shape of the roof of your mouth. So let's take that breath and I'll make my little umbrella open. Wonderful. You can practice doing that and get that feeling of space in the back of your mouth. Let's do a little singing on an NG so you can feel what it feels like when you have the nasal port open and you've got that closed oral cavity. So let's just do a few. Back of the tongue is high, palate is down. so you are aware of maybe what you don't want. We do have to make NG sounds, but it's a consonant that interrupts the sound, and we're not going to be resonating during that particular sound. Let's practice going between the NG and an E vowel, and you will feel as if you've got a contact in the back and then a lift and a lowering, this sort of thing. So we're going to do that's to feel the contrast between the lowered palate and the raised palate. And the E vowel has a high tongue anyway, so you want to find the high palate so that you do have that space that you want. Let's try going from ng to E to ah, and then staying on the ah and keeping the raised position of the palate. So we're going to go and I think you can be aware that my tongue is staying in that position where it is against the gum ridge, the alveolar ridge, front of my bottom teeth, back of my bottom teeth. All right. So now we know that our basic resonating spaces are that laryngeal collar, the actual pharynx, the throat, and then the oral cavity that we can shape by using our articulators. Another thing that can cause tension, and I mentioned if you have been told drop your jaw, you are depressing your larynx, and maybe you want to rethink it into release your jaw. Relaxation is also a double-edged sword. We want to have relaxation so that we don't have tension, but we also need energy and some muscle involvement in order to sing. So don't relax too much. There is hyperactivity and there's hypoactivity. We don't want either one. We want to be nice and balanced in the middle. Some things that you can do to help work on that tight jaw are things with L's in them. The L flips with the tongue, and then the tongue tip comes back into its neutral position, and it helps you remember to keep your jaw released. So we could go blah, 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 blah. Just gives us a nice jaw position without forcing it down. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Another nice exercise for keeping flexibility in the tongue as well as releasing the jaw. And this one goes from a fla, where again you let the tongue, that L is going to flip down and help you relax your tongue as well as making almost like one unit of the tip of the tongue and the jaw. And then we'll go into a vowel sound so that we can also work on keeping the palate high and that wonderful free space for resonating in the oral cavity and pharynx. So this one goes like this. Fla, fla, ni, fla, fla, na. Try it with me. Fla, fla, ni, fla, fla, na. Fla, fla, ni, fla, fla, na. Good. So things that you can work on between now and our next lesson are becoming aware of a raised versus a lowered soft palate. Oh, one more little exercise that you can do to see if you're singing nasal. Sing an NG and then pinch your nostrils. Mm. Oh wow, the tone stopped. I didn't make that up, it really happened. So try it. Mm. That tells you that all of the sound, the airflow was coming through the nasal cavity. Now, if you want to test yourself to see if you're keeping some nasality in your sound, and if you want a little bit for a twangy style, you can play with that too. But let's try just singing a descending ah vowel and pinching our nostrils. And if it changes the tone, if you feel like you're not getting a good airflow out of your mouth, you will want to then raise that soft palate. It's another exercise in finding, understanding how that happens. So here we go. And let's do this pitch. Or you can go back and forth. Notice that there really was, I don't think, any change in my tone quality when I pinched my nostrils. I'm going to be a little bit twangy, maybe do nya, and I'm going to see what happens. Nya, 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 nya. And you notice that there was some change in the tone quality when I pinched my nostrils. What we're going to work on right now is to find that uniformity of sounds, that your palate is lifted and that you have a nice relaxed jaw, a tongue that's in that forward neutral position, and wonderful openness and relaxation to create optimal resonance. So what we've done today is create the idea of a general posture for our best resonance. And in our next episode, we're going to go back to our vowels and see how reshaping of the resonator by using different vowel shapes can do what we call formant tracking, or changing where our resonating bands are that will enhance the pitch that we're singing. We're going to go through some ideas about what vowel modification is and how that can be used to create optimal resonance, uniform tone quality, and also help with things like extending our range and making our shifts through our different registers of our voice smoother. See you next time.